My name is Anita, and I'm 29 years old. I was standing in my parents' living room last Christmas when my mother turned to my Aunt Dorothy and said those words that still echo in my mind. "She's still job hunting," she announced, her voice carrying that familiar mix of disappointment and embarrassment. The CNN special report was playing on the television behind us, though no one was paying attention yet. In exactly 7 minutes, everything would change. Before I share what happened next, let me know where you're watching from today. Please hit like and subscribe if you've ever felt invisible to your own family, because what unfolded in the next few minutes changed everything about how I see family success and the price of keeping secrets. Let me take you back 18 months before that Christmas morning. I had just walked out of my corner office at Wellington Financial Group in Manhattan, carrying a cardboard box with my personal belongings. The security guard nodded sympathetically as I handed over my key card. I had been making $180,000 a year as a senior analyst, but I couldn't do it anymore. Not after what I had discovered. When I told my family about leaving my job, you would have thought I had announced I was joining a cult. My mother, Margaret, literally gasped and had to sit down on her pristine white sofa. "How could you throw away such a good position?" she demanded, her voice shaking with genuine distress. "Your father and I worked so hard to give you opportunities, and this is how you repay us." My sister Jennifer, 3 years older and already a senior associate at her law firm, immediately switched into career counselor mode. She pulled out her phone and started scrolling through her contacts. "I can get you interviews at 3 firms by Monday," she said, not even asking what I wanted to do next. My brother David, the tech entrepreneur, just shook his head and laughed. "Must be nice to afford a midlife crisis at 27, he said, though his eyes showed more contempt than humor. What I couldn't tell them was the truth. 3 months before I quit, I had accidentally received an email meant for someone else. It contained details about a massive healthcare fraud scheme targeting Medicare patients across 12 states. The company I worked for was helping to hide the money trail. I spent weeks documenting everything, creating encrypted files, and reaching out to journalists who might be interested. But I couldn't do this work while still employed there. It would have been too dangerous and possibly illegal. So I let my family believe I was having some kind of quarter-life crisis. I moved from my luxury apartment in Tribeca to a studio in Queens. I told them I was soul-searching, when really I was spending 16-hour days investigating a network of shell companies, fake medical billing codes, and elderly victims who had been charged for procedures they never received. My savings account dwindled from 50,000 to 5,000, then to 500. The monthly family dinners became torture sessions. My mother would casually mention job openings she had heard about through her country club friends. Jennifer would forward me articles about recovering from career setbacks. David would make jokes about me becoming a barista, asking if I had learned to make latte art yet. My father, Robert, said nothing, which was somehow worse than the comments. His silence felt like grief, like I had died and been replaced by a disappointing stranger. Meanwhile, I was building something extraordinary. After 6 months of investigation, I had enough evidence to approach major news outlets. The first three turned me down, saying the story was too complex and the proof too circumstantial. The fourth, a producer at CNN named Marcus Wells, saw the potential. He connected me with their investigative team, and we spent the next year building an airtight case. I remember the night before Thanksgiving when Marcus called to tell me they were ready to move forward. The FBI had been brought in, warrants were being prepared, and CNN would break the story on Christmas Day during their special report. I sat in my tiny studio apartment eating instant ramen, knowing that in 4 weeks everything would change. But I still couldn't tell my family. At Thanksgiving dinner, my mother introduced me to her friends as her daughter, who was taking some time to find herself. The pity in their eyes was unbearable. Jennifer's husband, Mark, offered to review my resume, speaking slowly, like I might not understand professional terminology. David's wife, Patricia, suggested I try online courses to update my skills. I smiled and nodded, counting down the days. The investigation intensified in December. I was meeting with FBI agents in unmarked offices, reviewing thousands of documents, and preparing for the aftermath. The stress was destroying me. I lost 15 pounds, developed insomnia, and started having panic attacks. But I couldn't stop. Too many elderly people had been hurt by this fraud. Some had lost their life savings. 3 had died after being denied real medical care they needed because their insurance had been maxed out on fake procedures. A week before Christmas, Marcus warned me that my name would be prominently featured in the report. "You're going to be famous," he said, "but not everyone is going to be happy about it." The companies involved had connections everywhere. I might face lawsuits, threats, or worse. Did I want to proceed? I thought about my family's dismissive comments, their lack of faith in me, and said yes. I was ready for whatever came next. What I wasn't ready for was the complete implosion of my relationship with the people who were supposed to love me most. I arrived at my parents' house in Westport, Connecticut on December 23rd, pulling up in my 10-year-old Honda Civic that David had once called a mobile tetanus risk. Their colonial home looked like something from a Christmas movie, with white lights perfectly arranged on every branch and a massive wreath on the red door. My mother had probably paid someone $5,000 to achieve that magazine-worthy perfection. Jennifer's Mercedes was already in the driveway parked next to David's Tesla. I sat in my car for a moment, preparing myself for the performance I would have to give for the next 2 days. Unemployed Anita still searching for her purpose, still disappointing everyone who mattered. I grabbed my overnight bag and the presents I had carefully budgeted for and walked to the door. My mother answered before I could knock, like she had been watching from the window. "Oh, good you made it," she said, her eyes scanning my outfit with barely concealed disapproval. I was wearing jeans and a sweater from Target. "Everyone else is already here. We were just talking about Jennifer's wonderful news. Come in before you let all the heat out." The house smelled like cinnamon and pine, with undertones of the expensive candles my mother ordered from France. In the living room, my family was arranged like a holiday advertisement. Jennifer sat with Mark on the love seat, her massive diamond ring catching the light from the chandelier. David and Patricia occupied the leather chairs by the fireplace, their 2 kids playing with tablets on the carpet. My father was in his recliner reading the Wall Street Journal on his iPad. Aunt Dorothy and Uncle George arrived an hour later, along with my cousins Tyler and Melissa. Tyler had just made partner at his consulting firm at 31. Melissa was finishing her residency at Johns Hopkins. Everyone had achievements to share, promotions to announce, successes to celebrate. When the conversation inevitably turned to me, my mother quickly interjected that I was still exploring my options, which was code for still unemployed and embarrassing us. The formal Christmas Eve dinner was held in the dining room with my grandmother's china and crystal glasses that cost more than my monthly rent. My mother had assigned seating, and despite being 29 years old, I was placed at the overflow table with the teenagers and children. "It's just easier this way," she explained when she saw my face. "The main table only seats 12. I helped serve the courses, playing the role of the helpful daughter who had nothing better to do. In the kitchen, I overheard my mother talking to Aunt Dorothy. "I just don't understand what went wrong," she was saying. "We gave her everything, the best schools, the best opportunities, and she just threw it all away. Maybe it's some kind of delayed rebellion." During the main course, Jennifer clinked her glass and stood up. "Mark and I have some wonderful news," she announced, her face glowing with satisfaction. "I've just been made partner at the firm. Youngest female partner in the company's history." The room erupted in congratulations. My mother actually cried, dabbing her eyes with her napkin. "We're so proud of you," she said, looking at Jennifer like she was the only daughter in the room. David went next, announcing that his startup had just closed a $30 million Series B round. The valuation was now over $200 million. He was hiring 50 new employees and had been featured in TechCrunch. My father actually smiled, raising his glass in a toast to entrepreneurial spirit and family success. Then everyone turned to look at me. The silence stretched out like a taut wire ready to snap. I opened my mouth, but my mother spoke first. "Anita is still finding her path," she said quickly, her tone suggesting this topic was already closed. "Now, who wants to hear about the renovations we're planning for the guest house?" The humiliation burned through me like acid. I excused myself to the bathroom and stood there, gripping the marble countertop, staring at my reflection. Just 24 more hours, I told myself. 24 hours and everything changes. But those hours felt like years. After dinner, while everyone gathered in the living room for coffee and dessert, I sat in the corner, invisible. Jennifer was showing Aunt Dorothy photos from their recent trip to Paris. David was explaining blockchain to Uncle George, who nodded along pretending to understand. The kids were playing with their new Christmas Eve gift, some expensive gaming system that cost more than I spent on groceries in 3 months. My phone buzzed with a text from Marcus. "Everything is set," it read. "The raids start at dawn. Story breaks at 10:30 a.m. Are you ready?" I typed back a simple yes, though my hands were shaking. I looked around the room at my family, laughing and comfortable in their success, having no idea that their failure of a daughter was about to be the lead story on CNN. That night, I lay in my childhood bedroom, staring at the ceiling covered in glow and the dark stars I had put up when I was 12. The room had been converted into a guest room, all traces of my personality erased except for those stars. I thought about all the dreams I'd had in this room, all the ways I'd imagined my future. None of them included being dismissed and diminished by the people who were supposed to believe in me most. But none of them included tomorrow either. Christmas morning arrived with fresh snow falling outside, covering the world in pristine white that matched my mother's aesthetic perfectly. I came downstairs at 9:30 to find everyone already gathered in the living room. The tree, a 12-foot Fraser fir, dominated the space, surrounded by presents wrapped in coordinating paper that my mother had probably spent hours selecting. "Morning, Sleeping Beauty," David said as I entered. "Nice of you to join the employed and successful." His kids laughed, not understanding the cruelty, but sensing they should respond to their father's tone. Patricia at least had the grace to look uncomfortable, nudging him with her elbow. We started opening presents with the youngest kids going first. I watched as they unwrapped iPads, gaming consoles, and designer clothes, their excitement pure and untainted by the undercurrents of judgment flowing through the room. When it was my turn, I received a collection of self-help books with titles like Finding Your Purpose After Failure and Career Comeback, a guide for late bloomers. Jennifer had given me a subscription to a job search website. David's gift was a coffee shop gift card with a note saying, "For all those job interviews." My parents gave me a check for $500 with a card that said, "We believe in you." Though my mother's expression suggested otherwise. The most painful gift came from Uncle George, who had wrapped up a book called The Millennial's Guide to Work Ethic, with a sticky note on the cover that said, "Thought this might help." I smiled and thanked everyone playing my part perfectly. The TV was on in the background, turned to CNN as always, because my father liked to keep up with the news even on holidays. It was 10:20 a.m., 10 minutes left. My phone started vibrating with calls from Marcus, but I let them go to voicemail. My heart was pounding so hard, I was sure everyone could hear it. Jennifer was telling a story about a difficult case she had won, gesturing dramatically with her coffee cup. Mark was adding details, building her up even more. No one noticed me checking the time every 30 seconds. At exactly 10:30, Anderson Cooper's face filled the screen with the breaking news banner flashing red. I held my breath. "Good morning and Merry Christmas," Anderson said, his silver hair perfect as always. "We begin today with a special investigation that has been a year in the making. What started as one journalist's discovery has led to what the FBI is calling one of the largest healthcare fraud schemes in American history." My mother glanced at the TV but kept talking to Aunt Dorothy about their upcoming cruise. No one was really paying attention yet. Anderson continued. "This morning, FBI agents conducted simultaneous raids in 12 states, arresting 73 individuals connected to a scheme that defrauded Medicare of an estimated $500 million. Thousands of elderly Americans were affected, charged for medical procedures they never received, with some denied real care when they needed it most." Jennifer looked up at the mention of the dollar amount. "That's huge," she said to Mark. "Someone's going to jail for a long time." The irony of her statement almost made me laugh. Anderson's voice grew more serious. "This investigation was led by independent journalist Anita Morrison, whose relentless pursuit of the truth over the past 18 months has exposed a network of corruption that reaches into some of the nation's largest healthcare companies." My name appeared on the screen in bold white letters. My photo, a professional headshot CNN had taken last week, filled the right side of the screen. Jennifer's coffee cup fell from her hand, shattering on the hardwood floor, and splashing hot liquid across her designer boots. The room went completely silent except for Anderson Cooper's voice. Morrison, a former financial analyst who left her position to pursue this investigation, went undercover to expose fraudulent billing practices that specifically targeted elderly Medicare recipients in nursing homes and assisted living facilities. Her investigation revealed a complex web of shell companies, fake medical procedures, and forged documents. My mother's face had gone white. She stood up slowly, her hand pressed to her chest like she was having a heart attack. David was frantically typing on his phone, presumably Googling my name. Patricia had grabbed their children and was covering their ears as if my success was somehow inappropriate for young minds. The screen now showed footage of the FBI raids from this morning, agents in bulletproof vests carrying boxes of evidence out of office buildings. Anderson continued his report. We go now to our investigative correspondent, Sarah Chen, who has been working with Morrison on this story. Sarah, tell us about the scope of what's been uncovered. The screen split showing Sarah in front of one of the raided buildings. Anderson, this is unprecedented. Anita Morrison single-handedly uncovered evidence that multiple healthcare companies were systematically billing Medicare for millions of dollars in fake procedures. We're talking about MRI scans that never happened, surgeries that were never performed, medications that were never dispensed. The elderly victims often had no idea they were being used in this scheme. My father had put down his iPad and was staring at the television, then at me, then back at the television. Uncle George's mouth was literally hanging open. The kids had stopped playing, sensing the dramatic shift in the room's energy. Sarah Anderson asked, "Tell us about the journalist who broke this story. How did one person uncover what federal investigators had missed for years?" Sarah smiled slightly. "Anita Morrison is quite remarkable. She gave up a six-figure salary to pursue this investigation, funding it herself for over a year. She received death threats, faced potential lawsuits, and risked everything to expose this fraud. She's been working with CNN for the past 6 months to verify every detail. This morning's arrests are a direct result of her work." Anderson nodded gravely. "We should note that Morrison's investigation has already led to several congressional leaders calling for immediate hearings on Medicare oversight. The Justice Department has announced a task force to review all Medicare billing practices nationwide. This story is far from over." The report continued with interviews of elderly victims, footage of the arrested executives being led away in handcuffs, and charts showing the flow of fraudulent money. My name appeared on screen repeatedly. Independent journalist Anita Morrison. Investigative reporter Anita Morrison. Whistleblower Anita Morrison. My mother finally found her voice. Why, she said, her tone accusatory rather than proud. "Why didn't you tell us?" The silence after my mother's question was deafening. Everyone was staring at me, their expressions ranging from shock to anger to something that looked like fear. The CNN report continued playing behind them, my name appearing every few seconds, as Anderson Cooper detailed more of my investigation. Jennifer was the first to fully react. She stood up, glass crunching under her boots from her dropped coffee cup. "You lied to us," she said, her voice shaking with rage. "For 18 months you let us think you were unemployed. You let us worry about you, try to help you, and the whole time you were what? Playing spy." "I didn't lie," I said quietly. "I just didn't tell you everything. There's a difference." David was still on his phone, his face growing more amazed and frustrated with each swipe. "This is everywhere," he announced. "CNN, MSNBC, Fox News, the New York Times, the Washington Post. You're trending #1 on social media." His tone suggested this level of attention was somehow offensive to him, that success should only belong to certain family members. Aunt Dorothy had undergone a complete transformation. She moved closer to me, her hand reaching out like she wanted to touch someone famous. "I always knew you were special," she said, though an hour ago she had been telling my mother I should consider going back to school for a more practical degree. "You always had that investigative spirit even as a child." My mother stood frozen in place, her face cycling through emotions like a slot machine trying to find the right combination. Finally, it settled on something between pride and fury. "My daughter," she said slowly, the CNN journalist. She turned to Uncle George. "Did you hear that? My daughter broke this story. My daughter is on CNN." The possessiveness in her voice made my stomach turn. These were the same people who had spent 18 months treating me like a failure, a disappointment, a cautionary tale about millennials who couldn't handle real jobs. Now suddenly, I was my daughter. Jennifer tried a different approach, attempting to minimize what was happening. Well, freelance journalism isn't exactly stable, she said, crossing her arms. This is one story. What happens when it's over? You can't live off one investigation forever. David jumped in to support his sister's narrative. And you could have come to me for help, he said. I know people in media. I could have introduced you to the right people, gotten you proper backing. Going at it alone was unnecessary and risky. But the phone in my pocket wouldn't stop buzzing. I pulled it out to see dozens of missed calls and hundreds of messages. Publishers wanted book deals. Netflix and HBO were bidding for documentary rights. 3 major news networks were offering me full-time positions with 6-figure salaries. The Pulitzer Committee had reached out about a nomination. My mother had grabbed her own phone and was already calling her friends. You'll never guess what's happening, she said to someone, probably her book club president. My Anita, yes, the one I've been telling you about, she's on CNN right now. A major investigation. FBI raids. She glanced at me like I was a trophy she had just won. I always knew she would do something special. We raised her to be independent and fearless. The revision of history was breathtaking. This was the same woman who just last week had told her hairdresser that I was going through a phase and would hopefully grow out of it soon. The same woman who had suggested I consider marrying well since my career wasn't panning out. Uncle George was now eager to associate himself with my success. You know, I have contacts at the New York Times, he said, pulling out his business card as if I needed it. I could make some calls, help you navigate this media attention. You'll need guidance from someone who understands how these things work. Patricia, who had barely spoken 10 words to me in 5 years, suddenly wanted to be my advisor. This is such a powerful story, she said. You should think about your personal brand. How you present yourself going forward will be crucial. I have a friend who does PR for celebrities. The hypocrisy was suffocating. These people who had written me off, who had made jokes about my unemployment, who had given me self-help books and job search subscriptions, were now scrambling to attach themselves to my success. The CNN report was still playing now, showing congressional leaders calling for immediate action based on my investigation. I stood up, needing space to breathe, but my mother grabbed my arm. "Where are you going?" she demanded. "We need to discuss how to handle this. The family should present a united front. Jennifer can help with any legal issues, David can manage the tech and social media aspects, and I'll handle the press inquiries that are sure to come to the house." They were planning my life again, just like they always had, except now I was worth planning for. The investigation that had nearly broken me, that had drained my savings and my sanity, was being packaged into a family success story where they all played supporting roles. "I need some air," I said, pulling away from my mother's grip. "But this is your moment," Jennifer said, her tone suggesting I was being ungrateful for their sudden interest. "We're trying to help you capitalize on it. You can't just walk away." I looked at each of them. These people who shared my blood but had never shared my belief in what I was doing. The children were watching everything with wide eyes, learning in real time that success changes how people treat you. Outside, the snow was still falling. I stood on the deck, feeling the cold air fill my lungs when I heard the door open behind me. I expected my mother or Jennifer, ready with more advice I hadn't asked for, but it was my father. He stood next to me in silence for a moment, then said quietly, "I'm sorry. We should have trusted you. We should have believed in you even when we didn't understand what you were doing." It was the first genuine moment since my name had appeared on CNN, but it was too little too late. The damage had been done over 18 months of dismissal and condescension. One apology couldn't erase the pain of being treated like a failure by the people who were supposed to love me unconditionally. My phone rang. It was Marcus. "I know this is bad timing," he said when I answered, "but we need you for a live interview tonight. Anderson wants to do a special segment at 8 p.m. Can you make it to our New York studio?" I looked back through the window at my family, now huddled around David's laptop, reading articles about me. My mother was on the phone again, her voice animated as she spread the news. Jennifer was taking pictures of the TV screen to post on her social media. They were feeding off my success like vampires who had just discovered fresh blood. "I'll be there," I told Marcus. "I'm leaving Connecticut right now." When I went back inside to get my bags, the feeding frenzy had intensified. My mother had already planned a celebration dinner for tomorrow, inviting extended family to come meet her successful daughter. Jennifer was drafting a LinkedIn post about how proud she was of her sister's investigative journalism. David was calculating the potential value of my story across different media platforms. "I have to go," I announced. "CNN needs me in the studio tonight." The panic in my mother's eyes was immediate. "But we're having Christmas dinner," she said. "The family is all here. You can't just leave." I packed my bags while they followed me, each offering reasons why I should stay. The dinner was planned. People were coming to see me. It would be rude to leave. They needed time to process this news together as a family. "You've had 18 months to be a family," I said, zipping my suitcase. "You chose to spend it telling everyone I was a disappointment. Now that I'm successful, you want to claim me. That's not how this works." My mother's face hardened. "We were being realistic," she said. "You quit a perfectly good job with no explanation. What were we supposed to think?" "You were supposed to trust me," I said. "You were supposed to believe that I knew what I was doing even if you didn't understand it. Instead, you made me feel like a failure every single day. Do you know how many times I almost quit because of your lack of faith? Do you know how much harder you made this?" Jennifer scoffed. "Oh, please," she said. "We motivated you. If we had been supportive, you might have gotten comfortable and given up. Our doubt pushed you to succeed." The delusion was incredible. They were actually trying to take credit for my success by claiming their cruelty had been motivational. I wanted to scream to list every humiliation, every dismissive comment, every moment they had made me question myself. But I didn't have time. CNN was waiting. I grabbed my keys and headed for the door, my family trailing behind me like desperate paparazzi. My mother made one last attempt. "What do I tell people?" she asked. "When they call about seeing you on the news, what do I say?" "Tell them the truth." I said, pausing at the door. "Tell them your unemployed disappointment of a daughter just exposed one of the biggest frauds in American history. Tell them she did it without your help, without your support, and despite your constant negativity. Or better yet, tell them nothing. For once, this isn't about you." The last thing I heard before the door closed was Jennifer saying, "She'll be back. She needs us. She always comes back." But she was wrong. I didn't need them anymore. I had never needed their doubt, their judgment, or their conditional love. What I had needed was their faith, and they had failed to provide it when it mattered most. Now they would have to watch my success from a distance, seeing my name in headlines, but not hearing it from my lips, claiming connection to me, but having no real place in my life. The snow was heavier now, making the drive treacherous, but I didn't care. Each mile between me and that house felt like freedom. My phone continued buzzing with opportunities, with congratulations from strangers who believed in my work more than my family ever had. As I drove toward New York, toward CNN, toward a future I had built entirely on my own, I thought about the investigation that had brought me here. All those elderly victims who had been betrayed by people they trusted, by systems that were supposed to protect them. I had fought for them when my own family wouldn't even fight for me. Maybe that's why I had been able to see the fraud so clearly. I knew what betrayal looked like. I had been living with it my entire life. The drive to New York took 3 hours through the snow, but I needed every minute to decompress from what had just happened. My phone plugged into the charger lit up continuously with calls and messages. I recognized some numbers from major publishers, others from news organizations, and several from Hollywood area codes that were probably production companies. But scattered among the professional opportunities were texts from my family. My mother had sent 12 messages in escalating panic. The first few were angry, demanding I return immediately. Then they shifted to manipulation, reminding me of everything they had done for me over the years. The last ones were pure desperation, begging me not to shut them out on Christmas Day. Jennifer's messages were threatening legal action if I mentioned the family negatively in any interviews. David had sent a business proposal for managing my media rights, complete with projected earnings and his proposed commission. Even Patricia had texted offering to be my stylist for television appearances. I pulled into a rest stop near Stamford to get coffee and check my voicemail. Marcus had left 3 messages about the evening interview, each one more excited than the last. The story was exploding even bigger than they had anticipated. Congressional leaders were demanding emergency hearings. The Justice Department was announcing a task force. 3 more healthcare companies had preemptively announced internal audits. There was also a voicemail from an unexpected source. Emma, my quiet cousin who had barely spoken during dinner, had left a message while I was driving. "Anita, it's Emma," her soft voice said. "I know we've never been close, but I wanted you to know that I understand. They do the same thing to me about my art. Everything I create is just a hobby to them until someone else validates it. You were brave to keep going without their support. I'm 32, and I still haven't found that courage. Anyway, Merry Christmas, and congratulations on doing something that actually matters." Her message made me cry for the first time that day. Not the cruel comments, not the attempted manipulation, but the one person who understood what it felt like to be dismissed by this family. I arrived at CNN's New York headquarters at 4 p.m. The building was mostly empty due to the holiday, but the skeleton crew that was there treated me like a celebrity. The security guard had seen the morning report and shook my hand enthusiastically. The producer who met me in the lobby kept saying she couldn't believe what I had accomplished alone. Marcus was waiting in the preparation room with a small team of stylists and production assistants. "You look shell-shocked," he said, studying my face. "Family Christmas didn't go well, I'm guessing." I laughed, though it came out more bitter than amused. They spent 18 months treating me like a failure, and then the moment my name appeared on screen, they wanted to own my success. My mother was already calling her friends to brag before Anderson had even finished the report. Marcus nodded knowingly. "Success reveals character," he said, "both in ourselves and in others. Come on, let's get you ready. Anderson wants to do an extended segment, really dig into how you uncovered all this. The public loves an underdog story, and yours is perfect." As the stylist worked on my hair and makeup, I thought about the concept of being an underdog. To the public, I was the brave journalist who sacrificed everything to expose corruption. But to my family, I had been the problem child who couldn't hold a real job. The disconnect was jarring. My phone buzzed with another call from my mother. I let it go to voicemail, but Marcus noticed my expression. "You want to talk about it?" he asked. I told him everything. The months of condescension, the Christmas Eve placement at the kids' table, the self-help books wrapped under the tree, my mother's rush to claim credit for my success. He listened without interrupting his expression, growing more sympathetic with each detail. When I finished, he was quiet for a moment. Then he said, "You know what the hardest part about success is? It's not achieving it. It's discovering that the people you wanted to make proud were never going to be proud of you no matter what you did. They were only ever going to be proud of themselves for being associated with you." The truth of his words hit me like a physical blow. That's exactly what had happened. My family wasn't proud of me. They were excited about what my success meant for them. Jennifer could brag to her law firm colleagues. David could leverage it for his startup networking. My mother could elevate her social status at the country club. At 7:45, I was seated across from Anderson Cooper in the studio. The lights were bright, the cameras intimidating, but I felt strangely calm. This was my story to tell, not my family's version of it. Anderson started with softball questions about how I first discovered the fraud, but then he asked something that made me pause. "This investigation cost you everything," he said. "Your savings, your stability, your safety. Was there ever a moment when you thought about giving up?" I thought about lying, giving a heroic answer about never wavering. But the truth was more powerful. Every single day I admitted, especially when the people who were supposed to support me the most made me feel like I was wasting my life. My family thought I was having some kind of breakdown. They kept trying to fix me to get me back into a traditional career. There were nights when I wondered if they were right, if I was delusional for thinking I could expose something this big on my own. "What kept you going?" Anderson asked. I thought about the elderly woman in Ohio who had been charged $40,000 for cancer treatments she never received. The man in Florida who died after being denied real surgery because his Medicare had been exhausted on fake procedures. The couple in Arizona who lost their home trying to pay for medical bills that were completely fraudulent. The victims, I said. Once I knew how many people were being hurt, I couldn't stop. Their pain was real, even if my family thought my work wasn't. Anderson leaned forward slightly. "Your family didn't know what you were doing." "I kept it secret for their safety initially," I explained. But honestly, after a few months, I realized they wouldn't have believed me anyway. They had already decided I was a failure. It was easier to let them believe that than to fight for their approval while also fighting to expose this fraud. The interview continued for another 20 minutes, covering the technical details of the investigation, the FBI involvement, and the expected congressional hearings. But what seemed to resonate most with Anderson and the production team was the personal cost of pursuing truth. As we wrapped up, Anderson said something off camera that stuck with me. The hardest stories to tell are often the most important ones, he said. And the people who should celebrate our courage are sometimes the ones who fear it the most. After the interview, Marcus took me to a nearby diner that was open on Christmas. We sat in a booth by the window, watching the snow continue to fall on the nearly empty streets. The waitress, a woman named Dolores, recognized me from the morning news and brought us free pie. My hero, she said, setting down 2 slices of apple pie with ice cream. My mother is in a nursing home. When I saw your report this morning, I called to make sure none of those companies were involved with her care. You might have saved her from being a victim. After she left, Marcus raised his coffee cup in a toast. To doing the right thing, he said, even when the people who should support you don't. My phone continued buzzing on the table. Family messages mixed with professional opportunities. I had a decision to make about how to move forward. But for the first time in 18 months, I felt clear about my priorities. I started by calling Emma back. When she answered, she sounded surprised. I wanted you to know that you're not alone, I said. The family's approval isn't worth sacrificing your art. Keep creating, keep believing in yourself, even if they don't, especially if they don't. We talked for an hour about art, about family, about the courage it takes to pursue something that others don't understand or value. She told me about the paintings she created at night after her day job, the galleries that had shown interest, the dreams she kept hidden from the family to avoid their judgment. By the time I hung up, I had made my decision about how to handle my family. I wouldn't cut them off completely, that would give them the victim narrative they would love. Instead, I would establish boundaries so firm they might as well be walls. Professional success would remain separate from personal relationships. They could tell people we were related, but they couldn't claim credit for my work. I spent the night in a hotel in Manhattan, ignoring the increasingly frantic messages from Connecticut. The CNN interview would re-air twice more that night, and each time my phone exploded with new opportunities. Publishers were offering million-dollar advances. Netflix and HBO were in a bidding war for the documentary rights. 3 universities wanted to offer me positions teaching investigative journalism. But the message that meant the most came from Marcus just before midnight. You did it, he wrote. You changed how this country protects its most vulnerable citizens. That's your legacy, not what your family thinks of you. 6 months later, I stood at the podium of the Columbia Journalism School, accepting the Polk Award for investigative reporting. The auditorium was packed with journalists, media executives, and advocates for healthcare reform. Somewhere in the back rows, my family sat in seats I had reluctantly reserved for them. They had tried everything over these 6 months to reinsert themselves into my narrative. My mother had given interviews to local papers, claiming she had always encouraged my independent spirit. Jennifer had written an op-ed about supporting family members in unconventional careers, conveniently forgetting her 18 months of condescension. David had started telling people at tech conferences that he had advised me on data analysis for the investigation, a complete fabrication. But I had built something stronger than their revisionist history. The book about my investigation had spent 12 weeks on the New York Times bestseller list. The Netflix documentary had been nominated for an Emmy. More importantly, the congressional hearings had led to real reform in Medicare oversight, saving countless elderly Americans from fraud. As I gave my acceptance speech, I talked about the importance of pursuing truth, even when it costs everything. I mentioned the victims, whose stories had driven me forward, the CNN team, who had believed in the investigation, and the FBI agents, who had risked their careers to pursue justice. I did not mention my family. After the ceremony, they cornered me at the reception. My mother was wearing a dress she had clearly bought for the occasion, something that screamed, "I'm the mother of someone important." Jennifer had brought business cards ready to network with media lawyers. David was live streaming on his phone, trying to build his own social media following off my success. That was beautiful, my mother said, reaching to adjust my hair like she had when I was a child. Though you could have mentioned your family's support. People like to hear about that. What support? I asked quietly. She bristled at the question. We're here, aren't we? We've always been here. The delusion was still strong even after all these months. They had convinced themselves that their presence now erased their absence then, that showing up for the success made up for abandoning me during the struggle. I was saved from responding by Susan Martinez, my new mentor, and the editor-in-chief of the Washington Post. She had become the family I chose, the support system I built, the validation that came from respect rather than blood. Anita, we need to go, she said, not even acknowledging my family. The president's communication director wants to discuss your next investigation. As I walked away, I heard my mother telling another guest that she had always known I would do something special. The lie came so easily to her, repeated so often, that she probably believed it herself. The next investigation Susan and I were planning would expose corruption in pharmaceutical pricing. Another story that would protect vulnerable Americans from corporate greed. It would take months of dangerous work, considerable financial risk, and absolute dedication to truth. My family would once again be absent for the struggle and present for the success. But I had learned something valuable from that Christmas morning when my name appeared on CNN, while my mother called me unemployed. Family isn't defined by blood or obligation or shared holidays. It's defined by who shows up when you're unknown, who believes when there's no evidence, who supports when there's no glory to share. My biological family had failed that test spectacularly. They had shown me exactly who they were when they thought I was nobody. Now that I was somebody, their attempts to claim connection felt like another form of fraud, smaller than what I had exposed but equally dishonest. I found my real family in unexpected places. Marcus, who had believed in my investigation when it was just a theory. Susan, who mentored me without needing credit. Emma, who understood the pain of family dismissal. Dolores from the diner, who brought me free pie on Christmas night. The elderly victims, who wrote me letters thanking me for fighting for them. These people who owed me nothing gave me everything my blood family wouldn't: genuine support, unconditional belief, and love, without scoreboards. The book tour that followed the award ceremony took me to 30 cities. In each one, people asked about my inspiration, my courage, my determination. They wanted to know how one person could stand up against such massive corruption. I always gave the same answer. When you have nothing left to lose, when the people who should support you have already written you off, you become dangerously free. Free to pursue truth without worrying about approval. Free to risk everything because you've already lost the thing that should matter most, and survived. My family tried to attend some of the book signings, positioning themselves for photos, telling anyone who would listen about their connection to me. But I had structured the tour to minimize their opportunities for glory grabbing. Security knew not to give them special access. Event coordinators were instructed not to mention them in introductions. They were just faces in the crowd, which is all they had ever let me be to them. One night in Chicago, a young woman approached me after a signing. She was crying, clutching my book like a lifeline. My family thinks I'm wasting my life trying to become a documentary filmmaker, she said. They want me to go to law school to be practical. Your story gives me hope that I can succeed without their approval. I signed her book with a message: trust your vision, even if you have to trust it alone. The people who matter will find you along the way. The ones who don't believe in you were never your people to begin with. She hugged me, then this stranger who understood something my own mother never had. That sometimes the greatest act of love is believing in someone's dreams when there's no evidence they'll succeed. And sometimes the greatest act of self-love is pursuing those dreams anyway. The months continued with more awards, more investigations, more opportunities to expose truth and protect the vulnerable. My family continued their attempts at association, growing more desperate as I became more distant. My mother sent birthday cards with long notes about family bonds. Jennifer invited me to her law firm events as a special guest. David offered me percentage points in his startup if I would mention it in interviews. I responded to none of it. Not out of cruelty, but out of clarity. They hadn't earned access to this version of me. They had rejected the struggling version, the searching version, the version that needed support. They didn't get to claim the successful version just because we shared DNA. The one family member I maintained contact with was Emma. She had found the courage to leave her day job and pursue art full-time. I became her first patron, buying several paintings for my new apartment. We met for coffee when our travels aligned two family outcasts who had found their own ways forward. She sold her first major piece to a museum in Boston, the same week my second investigation broke nationally. We celebrated together over champagne, toasting to the family we had become for each other, by choosing to see what our blood relatives couldn't. The year anniversary of that Christmas morning arrived with another snowfall, though this time I was watching it from my apartment in Washington, D.C. I had moved there to be closer to the political stories I was now investigating, and to be farther from Connecticut. My mother had sent a Christmas card with a family photo that I wasn't in. Inside, she had written, "Wish you were here, but we understand you're busy being important." The passive aggression was so perfectly her that I actually laughed. I spent that Christmas differently. Susan invited me to her family's celebration, where I was welcomed not as a famous journalist, but as someone Susan cared about. Her children, both in college, peppered me with questions about investigative techniques. Her husband, a professor, engaged me in debates about media ethics. Her elderly mother, a retired teacher, held my hand and told me I was brave. This is what family feels like, I thought, watching Susan's mother teach her grandchildren to make tamales. No one was keeping score. No one was waiting for someone to fail. No one was measuring worth by traditional metrics of success. That evening, CNN ran a retrospective on the healthcare fraud investigation 1 year later. They interviewed several of the elderly victims who had gotten their money back, the FBI agents who had led the raids, the congressional leaders who had reformed the Medicare system. They also tried to interview my family. The footage they showed was telling. My mother standing in her perfect Connecticut home talking about how proud she was of her daughter's accomplishments. Jennifer in her law office claiming she had provided legal advice throughout the investigation. David at some tech conference describing how his entrepreneurial spirit had inspired me. All of them rewriting history, erasing their cruelty, painting themselves as supportive figures in a journey they had actually tried to derail. But then CNN showed something that made me smile. They had found footage from a local news segment filmed at a charity event 2 years ago, during the height of my investigation when my family thought I was unemployed. In it, my mother was asked about her children. She spoke glowingly of Jennifer's legal career and David's startup success. And Anita, the reporter, asked. My mother's face had tightened. "Anita is taking some time to find herself," she said dismissively. "We're hoping she'll get back on track soon." The contrast between that footage and her current claims was so stark that the CNN commentators actually laughed. "It's amazing," one said, "how success can change a family's narrative." Marcus called after the segment aired. "Your mother has called the network 3 times demanding we remove that old footage," he said, clearly amused. "She says it was taken out of context." "It was the perfect context," I replied. "It was the truth before she knew there was glory to claim." That night, I sat down to write the acknowledgments for my second book, the one about the pharmaceutical investigation that had just resulted in federal indictments. I thanked Susan for her mentorship, Marcus for his belief, the sources who had risked everything to expose corruption, the victims whose stories drove me forward. In the final paragraph I wrote, "Sometimes the people who should be our foundation become the lessons in what we can overcome. To those who pursue truth without support, who fight without fanfare, who succeed without approval, you are not alone. Your work matters even if the people who should celebrate it don't, especially then." My editor asked if I wanted to add anything about family. I told her I already had. The family that mattered was already in those acknowledgments. The family that shared DNA could read about my success like everyone else from a distance, with no special access to the person they had failed to see when seeing me would have meant everything. As I finished this Christmas day so different from the one a year ago, I felt something I hadn't expected: gratitude. Not for my family's eventual recognition, which meant nothing, but for their initial rejection, which meant everything. Their disbelief had taught me that external validation, even from those we're programmed to seek it from, is worthless compared to the internal knowledge that we're doing something that matters. Their failure to support me had forced me to find strength I didn't know I had. Their dismissal had made me dangerous, willing to risk everything, because I had already lost their approval and survived. Their cruelty had inadvertently given me the freedom to pursue truth without compromise. The snow continued to fall outside my window as I opened my laptop to start researching my next investigation. This one would expose environmental crimes affecting low-income communities. It would be dangerous, expensive, and exhausting. My family, if they knew about it, would once again question my choices until the moment my name appeared in headlines. But I didn't need them to know. I didn't need their approval or their support or their sabotage. I had learned the hardest lesson that Christmas morning when my mother called me unemployed, while CNN called me a hero. The people who matter will see you when there's nothing to gain from seeing you. Everyone else, even if they share your blood, your history, your last name, is just noise. As midnight approached, marking the end of this anniversary day, I received one last message. It was from an elderly woman in Maine whose life savings had been recovered because of my investigation. She wrote, "Dear Miss Morrison, I don't know if you have family or if you're alone this Christmas, but I want you to know that you're in the prayers of hundreds of people you've never met. We may not share blood, but you fought for us when you didn't have to. That makes you family in the ways that truly matter. Merry Christmas, and thank you for seeing us when no one else would." I printed that message and pinned it to my wall next to the Polk Award, the Emmy nomination, and all the other recognition that had come too late to matter to the people who should have believed from the beginning. Then I got back to work. There were more truths to uncover, more vulnerable people to protect, more corruption to expose. And I would do it the same way I had done everything else that mattered. Without my family's permission, without their support, and without looking back at the people who had chosen to see me only after the rest of the world forced them to look. The greatest revenge against those who don't believe in you isn't proving them wrong. It's succeeding so completely that their opinion becomes irrelevant. It's building a life so full of purpose and connection that their absence isn't a loss, but a liberation. That Christmas morning when my mother called me unemployed while CNN called me a hero wasn't the end of my story with my family. It was the beginning of my story without them. And that story, the one I chose to write myself, was worth more than all the approval they could never give, and all the love they could only perform when cameras were watching. To everyone watching, who has ever felt invisible to your own family, who has pursued dreams without support, who has succeeded despite the people who should have believed in you most, I want you to know that your worth isn't determined by their recognition. Your value doesn't increase when they finally see it. You were always worthy, always valuable, always enough. They just weren't equipped to see it, and that's their loss, not yours. Thank you for listening to my story. If you've experienced something similar, please share in the comments below. How did you find the strength to continue when your family didn't believe in you? What gave you the courage to succeed without their support? Your stories matter, and unlike some families, this community sees you even when there's no glory to share. Please like this video if it resonated with you, subscribe for more stories of overcoming family betrayal, and share this with someone who needs to hear that they don't need their family's permission to be extraordinary.